So what actually inspired this episode of That Costs How Much is that we are working on an apartment makeover in the style of wabi sabi, organic modern, for somebody, our producer Nina. And while we're planning that makeover coming out next week, we realized that we definitely need to DIY some of these pieces in order to keep the cost down. And also, that's just like what we do here. Trust the process, trust the process.
Who's this? Danger, 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 danger. Are we just guessing?
That costs how much?
Let's start off by working on this wabi sabi cloud pendant, which I've seen sold anywhere from a couple $100s to versions that are $1,300. Let me tell you some tea about this pendant. I have actually seen them being sold everywhere on Facebook Marketplace, and I think that's because people are ordering them on like Instagram ads or something, and then when they show up to their doorstep, it is this big. Like it's 15 inches and it costs them a couple of $100s, because the ones that are 30 inches are the ones that are really expensive. So I think people are reselling them on Facebook Marketplace because they didn't want it in the small size, they wanted it in the larger size. So today we're definitely gonna be making the large size at around 30 inches, and I think we can definitely make it for a lot less than $1,300. This is gonna be the focal point pendant in the living room, so let's get to it. We're essentially gonna make a mold and then paper mache on top of that mold. For the mold, I'm using a extra large balloon. This is actually called a punching balloon, and some bubble wrap. Believe it or not, we had this in the storage room, because of course we did. Quickly realizing we might not be able to do 31 inches. Yeah, the professional balloon artists are just like, that is satisfying as
It's not like the sound, it's just like the precursor. So what's about to happen?
I think I blew it up a little more than it wants to be blown up. Ew, that was like wet inside. I actually think it was popping because I removed and replaced my packing tape a few times, and then somehow that may have weakened the balloon membrane. So take it from me, do not try to reposition your tape once it's already on the balloon. I'm rolling out my bubble wrap into small sections in order to create a shape that is round like the balloon, but in the end it will still feel like it has some thickness to it that we're not going to be able to get from just the paper mache. By adding these rolls about 2/3 of the way down the balloon, I'm hoping it'll achieve our desired shape, and since the bubble wrap is plastic, the final paper mache structure will peel away easily from the mold. Okay, so the mold is done, and if you know the Sorry Girls, you'll know that we're big on sustainability, and I'm sure what you see in front of you isn't giving you the epitome of sustainability, but I honestly don't know a better way to do it, and most of these are materials we actually already had, including the flyers that Rochelle used when she made the cauldron for Halloween. Let's get to paper mache. To make the paper mache paste, I'm using 2 parts classic white school glue and 1 part water. Dipping my newspaper strips into the paste and starting to cover this balloon. I'm going over the balloon slightly at random and making sure to wrap the bottom bubble wrap rim, but I'm not doing the section of the balloon that is below the bubble wrap. When I was planning out this project and figuring out how to do it, I actually referenced a few different videos. Rachel has done plaster DIYs here on the Sorry Girls, so I watched that video. And also House Gonda has a video on how to do a wabi sabi pendant. And after a bunch of research, this is the way I think will work best. On that note about wabi-sabi, it's important to note that the term originates from Zen Buddhism and a Japanese worldview focusing on the acceptance and appreciation of the imperfect. We're now seeing this term applied to the style of interior design, which also focuses on organic and imperfect shapes, much like the imperfect shape of this pendant shade I'm DIYing.
Okay, so gotta leave this for a while to dry, ideally 24 hours. In the meantime, I'm gonna move on to the next project, but for that, we need to go to the store.
Okay, for our second project, I'm gonna be tackling a slatted wood bench. These slatted wood benches can cost up to $2,500 like this one on First Dibs, but I think my final piece might look a little bit more like this one from HK Living, which goes for $849. Now, I'm not gonna be using a specialty wood, but I have seen a lot of people on the internet DIY slatted wood benches, including on Anna White's blog, which I will link down below. So I know I can do this, and we first need to get some lumber. For this, we'll need 7 2x4s that are 8 feet long and 3 1x4s that are 8 feet long. I'm also gonna pick up a pack of screws and a wood stain.
Okay, back from the hardware store, and I'm ready to chop some wood because this is gonna be such an easy DIY, right? Right? So I have my miter saw here. You can also use a circular saw if that's what you have on hand. So the length of my bench is gonna be 50 inches. I encourage you to customize this to whatever your space might need. And I'm gonna cut 7 of those pieces out of my 2x4s. So since I'm making a bunch of cuts and I want them to all be exactly the same, I'm taking the piece that I just measured and cut, lining it up. I'm gonna put down my saw. I can actually lock that off. And then I can just make sure this lines up to the blade. And then I have a block and a clamp, and I'm just gonna put this on my extension so that I don't have to measure every single time. I'll just line it up to the block. Next level tips, you know? Taking your skills to the next level. And obviously, Rochelle taught me this, obviously. So now we're gonna do the same thing with our offcuts, cutting to 14.5 to make up some of the legs.
I'm gonna cut 14 pieces.
I don't know where I'm gonna pile my next cuts because there's no more room on my fireplace. But anyways, we're gonna do our final cuts out of the 1x4s. I'm going to be doing them 18 inches long, and I'm gonna do 12 of them. Essentially, this bench is gonna consist of long pieces that are gonna be a slatted top, and then also legs, which are gonna include the 2x4s, but also 1x4s to fill in the gaps, and then we're gonna glue and screw it all together, but it's all easy.
Once all of my pieces are cut, I'm going to get to sanding. For the long top pieces, I'm sanding all of the sides. For the short leg pieces, I'm only sanding the ends and the skinny side. There's not really a need to sand the large faces except for 4 of the 2x4s, which will be my outside pieces.
So to assemble this bench, I'm first laying down 2x4s. These are my best front-facing 2x4s. We have 2 that are gonna make up the legs, and then the one long one that makes up the seat. This is now where the magic happens. We lay down some glue, and then a 1x4 bridges the gap between the leg 2x4 and the seat 2x4, creating a secure corner. I'm drilling 2 pilot holes where the 2x4 leg meets the 1x4 and then screwing those into place. And then I'm adding 2 screws on the diagonal where the 1x4 meets the 2x4 seat portion. I then repeat that on the other side, and then we repeat the whole process again. So we need to add 2x4s for the legs, a long 2x4 for the seat, and then I'm always going in with a carpenter square to make sure that everything is level and lining up, because the last thing I want to do is build a bench that has angled legs. We got to be careful of splitting wood here, so make sure we're drilling our holes further in from the edges of the wood and just go slow, and your pilot hole will definitely help with this too. To make sure I wasn't screwing screws on top of screws, I always alternated the corner diagonals, and for the legs, I kind of just went for it. I just kind of moved around and it all worked out in the end. I went through almost all 100 screws. So this is why there is a back side and a front side. You're gonna have the screws exposed here. You can always do fancy things. You can fill this with wood filler, you can fill this with wood dowels if you really countersunk the screws and drill out the hole. But for these purposes, it's gonna be up against the wall. So I just already know this is my back side. Oh my God, okay. It's a little heavy. It's a little heavy. This is why I do CrossFit. This is why I do CrossFit. I'm good. Wow. That was such a Becky wow. Am I wrong?
Oh my God.
Okay, now our floor here is not level at all, so we don't trust that, but sturdy. Sit on this side, you can sit on this side, you can lay down. So I'm just gonna hit it with another sand, like so quick, and then we're gonna stain it. So for the stain, I'm actually using something called an aged wood accelerator. For that cost, how much purposes, a little can costs $12.70. But since I actually have more things to stain for our upcoming makeover, I'm gonna use a large can. So this aged wood accelerator is kind of like stain, but does some reaction with the wood to make it look quite natural. And I like it for my project since the space this is going into has gray toned floors. So I really want the finish to be very neutral, leaning, and gray, which is hard to get out of a lot of stains. Trust me, I tried. So if I were doing this again, and I'm going to because the space that we're making over needs 2 benches, I would actually stain it before assembling, just because it doesn't go on very evenly because it's an accelerator and not a stain. So although it wasn't hard to get into the nooks and crannies, it was just hard to make sure everything was even. So I'm gonna stain it beforehand next time, and you might want to too if you try out this project. Anyways, next step is to add a matte clear coat, and then I think we're done. I think it's time to see how this thing stacks up. This project cost $67.66. I think that's a pretty good investment for this project. You definitely cannot buy a new one for this cost, and it is a huge savings when compared to our, that cost how much piece? At $849. Like if you've never tried woodworking before, you can do this, and I would actually encourage you to try it as one of your first woodworking projects because it's simple. So back to working on our pendant. Yesterday when it was dry, I noticed it was giving more like old army helmet or bucket hat instead of organic blob, which is what we're going for. So I decided to take some crumpled newspaper and fill in the gaps where it kind of flares out at the bottom. So once I fixed the shape and attached that with masking tape, I then went over the whole thing again with another coat of newspaper paper mache. So our next step I'm super excited for, and it is to make it look less like newspaper and more like beautiful stone plaster. And Rachel, when she did a bunch of plaster DIYs, used this product. It's celluclay. It's also considered paper mache, but I think it's like industrial paper mache that's white and a really interesting texture. Now, I already have this half-used bag, but for that cost, how much purposes, if I were to buy a new bag, it would be $37. So this really just jacked up the price of this DIY, but that's okay. I'm gonna mix up some of this. You just follow the instructions. I'm not going to. I'm just gonna make the right consistency because I don't really have we don't have a scale, right? We do? Do I care? Do I care?
Okay, plot twist, I do care. So I'm weighing out 450 grams of celluclay and then adding 32 ounces of warm water and mixing and kneading to create a dough-like texture. Then by adding small handfuls, I'm flattening the celluclay by pressing it into my newspaper mache structure. I'm trying to do the thinnest coat possible to maximize the amount of product I have and also limit drying time. I'm obsessed. This texture is exactly what we're looking for.
Okay, I have a good solid coat on it except for the very current bottom, but actual top, just because I want to focus on this part. And this is the moment I have been waiting for since I popped the previous balloons. Let's pop it. I want to like look away, but I want to watch at the same time. Why am I so afraid right now? Literally, what is happening? Ah! Ah! Okay, wow. Okay, that came out so much easier than I thought it would. It's so like shiny inside because it's just covered in glue. Okay, now we can actually see what this is gonna look like. Except I can't see because I'm holding. Like, wow. Oh, but now we actually have to do more of the paper mache on the inside, because obviously this glossy newspaper is not the vibe. So I kind of learned something, and it's that while the outside is still wet, I can't do the inside because it's just, like, see that? Ah. Danger, 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 danger. So I'm only partway done the inside, but I'm gonna finish up the outside so that the outside can fully dry. I'll have to leave that overnight, and then I can continue the inside. With the outside completely dry, I can now celluclay the inside without the risk of the entire piece collapsing due to it being too wet.
Honestly, this stuff has the weirdest smell. Like, why does it smell like this? Here goes nothing. Another little tip while working with this product is to dip your hand in water in order to smooth out any chonky bits. Now I'm putting this in the warmest part of our office under our industrial heater in order to dry for another 24 hours.
This morning I went to the hardware store to pick up some spray paint. I was looking for a matte spray paint, and just so we all know, that's in the chalk paint section. At least for specifically this chiffon cream color I was going for. Then I'm gonna give it a quick little coat of paint. Now we can make our paper mache blob into a beautiful pendant light. For that we need a light cord kit. This one is from IKEA, $5.20. And the way you would normally hang a pendant, the way I would normally hang a pendant, is to put the pendant on here and then add this little piece. That means I would need to drill a hole about this big. So that's one way to do it, but I do think that the inspo picture has the light bulb hanging a little bit lower. Having the light peeking out really completes the look of it, and I think makes it look more like a light fixture and less like a paper mache blob, which we are trying to make sure it doesn't go too far that direction. So what I'm actually going to use is this metal bracket cord grip. I honestly had no idea if this existed. I just knew I needed something that would clamp onto the cord and hold the pendant up. And it was when I Googled it, this is what came up. It was $7.40, and this is going to grip onto a higher portion on my light cord, allowing the paper mache blob to sit higher and the bulb to be a little bit more exposed. To make a hole in the top of my blob, I'm using my measuring tape to measure the middle point. Then I need to choose a drill bit size. For me, that's 1/2 inch because that's the size of the top of my cord grip bracket. Drilling a hole is really easy because all this really is some paper. Next, I need to attach my cord grip bracket at the desired position on the light cord, which allows the light bulb to peek out to the bottom of the pendant shade. And then bring that wire through the hole that we just made, allowing the shade to rest on the cord grip bracket. Then install as you would a normal light. Okay, the last thing we need to do is a little how much cost comparison. And my grand total for all of the supplies used was $71.85. That might sound a little bit Expensive for a DIY? I don't know, but I'm about to make it make a lot more sense. Now we know these pendants are sold in multiple different sizes, and my pendant ended up being kind of the middle size at 23 inches versus the large size at 31 inches. So I'm gonna be comparing it to the cost of the medium-sized pendant, which is $1,094. So by DIYing this pendant instead of buying it, I didn't have to spend $1,022.15. So I just made $1,022. Girl math? You're not gonna wanna miss the makeover that these DIYs are a part of. That comes out next week, but if you're not in the 24-hour crew, aka those that watch in the first 24 hours, comment if that's you, then this video may already be out, so you can check out our full wabi sabi organic modern makeover anywhere here or the description down below. And we'll see you next time. Thanks for watching. Bye.
Oh my god. What did you guys do? Oh my god. This is the fun game. What switch is it? Gotta use my 90-degree angle for this one. Oh no. Gotta use my handheld 90-degree angle for this one. Oh no. Gotta use my friggin' hands for this one.